What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. And we have plenty to talk about. Lots of upsets that happened last week, so especially on the men's side, such as Grand Canyon, the Lopes of GCU, taking down number 1 BYU in straight sets. Never would have thought I'd be saying those words. Good job to the Lopes. Biggest victory of the year. And Concordia of Irvine, we're pulling out the reverse sweep card against UCLA. How did the Eagles do it, and what went wrong for the Bruins? And McKendree, never thought I'd be saying their name. McKendree taking down Lewis of Romeoville. They are still undefeated at 8-0. We also had some women's upsets, such as Washington, the Huskies, taking a bite out of the Utes. And to me, I thought this team impressed me last week. Pepperdine taking down BYU in straight sets and taking Baylor to the limit on the road. Did they pull off the win, or was it a close loss? Also, we had Athletes Unlimited women's volleyball kicking off, and we also had some postponements in the NCAA women's volleyball world. What matches were postponed? All that and more here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome one, welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Thank you all for joining me. I appreciate you all being here. Special shout out to Adam Karnick, who just popped in the chat room saying good evening. And he says, welcome to Monday nights. It's a great spot to be in. It kind of is, actually, because normally I'm supposed to be on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern. But I'm actually switching it up and going on live on Mondays at 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern. That's because a lot of things are happening in my life. I had to switch around Set Points show day, so it is what it is. And honestly, I wish I could be with the Tuesday crew with Marcus, Dave, and Ryan, and our new show, the Yinza Report. But unfortunately, that is not the case, and unfortunately, I have to move to Mondays. But hey, I get to be with my boy Adam Karnick, who just recently was on here talking about Patrick Kane and the Chicago Blackhawks and the possibility of Russell Wilson going to the Chicago Bears. So yeah, Adam Karnick had a great show an hour before me, and he always does a great job. And I appreciate him passing the mic over to me. And also gotta give a shout out to Larry B. Thank you for popping in the chat room. Hope y'all can hear me well, and if not, then just give me a holler, but it doesn't seem like there's any problems going on. So before we dive on into the volleyball action, we have to we have to talk about our sponsors. We have 3 sponsors, and the first sponsor is Legacy Financial. 2020 was a tough year. However, staying positive, keeping your faith, and continuing to work hard is the goal. If you're in a financial struggle at the moment, or you're doing well, or you want to get to the next level, or you're looking for a new opportunity to work for yourself and earn more money part-time, give AO a call at 510-928-2104. Once again, that number is 510-928-2104 to book your appointment today. AO and her husband Andrew are just 2 people on a mission to help families build a legacy, because every family needs a legacy. You can follow them on Twitter at legacy_uncut, and you could follow them on Instagram at Sims_uncut. So that's our first sponsor. iSports Radio's second sponsor is Mom is Always Right Media. Are you feeling overwhelmed with schoolwork? Are those essays keeping you up at night? Don't lose sleep. Pick up the phone. Mom is Always Right Writing Agency will give you quality essays, and they will always make their deadlines. Sleep soundly knowing that they are on the job. For more information, call 626-653-3649. And once again, that phone number is 626-653-3649. And if you're ever in the neighborhood, check out one of Mama's Always Right Media's podcast, It Goes Down in the PM. Make sure you check out the newest episode of It Goes Down in the PM, brought to you by Mama's Always Right Media. And then the second podcast from Mama's Always Right Media is Coffee After Dark. Don't miss the next chapter of your favorite love story. Check out Season 2 of Coffee After Dark, brought to you by Mama's Always Right Media, where they will help you open your business from start to finish. And then the last sponsor from iSports Radio is the Sports Rundown. Are you a sports fan but have too much going on in your life these days to keep up with the 24/7 news cycle? Or maybe you are new to sports and want to understand the nuances better. If so, the Sports Rundown is for you. They are a new podcast that gives you basic, professional, and collegiate sports news, stats, tidbits, and fun facts by the time you get to work, start that second cup of coffee, or finish walking the dog. Enough information to make you rich with knowledge involving sports while talking about current sporting events. And they will teach you something fun along the way, like about mascots, uniforms, histories, feel-good stories, and sports rules. They even cover the Premier League. New episodes drop Monday and Friday mornings, so come give them a listen. So thank you to our 3 sponsors for being the official sponsors of iSports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. So there's that. So gotta give a shout out to my boy Davidson Crooks in the chat room saying what's good. Well, you're just in time, Davidson. I'm actually about to recap some of the upsets that happened. And one upset actually came from your favorite conference, the SEC. So there's that. But first, I actually got to get into some news. And it's not really bad news, but it's just some retirement news. So after an incredible career in beach volleyball, 3-time AVP champion and 2015 Best Offensive Player of the Year, Ryan Doherty, bids farewell to the sport of beach volleyball. So, this news actually just broke a little while ago, so I'm not going to go too much on it, but he left quite the legacy, and honestly, I wish him the best in retirement, so thank you for everything you did for the sport of beach volleyball, and we hope retirement treats you well, Ryan. So, it is sad every time someone retires, but at the same time, you know, your body just gives you that message saying it's time to shut down. And he even said it best. When I think back about my time in beach volleyball, the same line keeps echoing in my head. I gotta play with giants. I got a chance to compete with and against the best of the best. So he actually has an article that was just posted by the AVP or on Twitter at AVP Beach. So there's that. So now let's get into the upsets. So let's start with the men's side of things. So the first upset on the men's side of things was, well, the first noteworthy upset, in my opinion, was BYU at Grand Canyon. Number 1 BYU at Grand Canyon. Now, at a glance, I saw a mismatch right here. I saw Grand Canyon as a heavy underdog because Grand Canyon only has 1 win on the season against Concordia of Irvine. However, Grand Canyon decided to pull out the reverse card. In the first set, it was very tight as there were 11 ties and 3 lead changes, but Grand Canyon surprisingly took the first set 25-22. Now, the second set, hold on to your chairs, ladies and gentlemen. The second set was bonkers, as there were 21 ties, and there were multiple lead changes in set number 2. According to the stat sheet or the box score, there were 44 lead changes, but I don't really believe that personally. But there were multiple lead changes and multiple ties in set number 2, but Grand Canyon managed to grind it out and take set 2 by a score of, get this everybody, 45-43. That is beyond the 25-point cap or the 25-point target, or however you want to call it. Either way, that is some impressive stuff because you're facing the number 1 team, and even though you're at home, even though Grand Canyon was at home, you're facing the number 1 team, and you're able to outlast them in a set like that. Normally, most teams fold under that type of pressure, but Grand Canyon really brought it in that second set. And in the third set, they had all the momentum from winning that second set. Grand Canyon just straight up just carried that momentum into set 3 and just steamrolled BYU. So I talked about how set 2 was super close, but set 3 was just nowhere near close, as Grand Canyon took set number 3, 25-10, completing the sweep, and down went number 1. Absolutely bonkers. I was very impressed with Grand Canyon. I was like, holy cow, that is some massive upset. So, I don't know how Grand Canyon did it, but BYU was at full strength. They did have Felipe de Brito Ferreira, who missed a little of last week's game because he went down with a lower leg injury. I think it was an ankle injury, so according to BYU's school newspaper. So there was that. Adam says 45-43. Some people's arms were tired after that one. I agree, and it's tough because you're playing one of the number 1 teams in the nation, and the fact that you have to go that far, that's basically like playing 2 sets. That's almost playing 2 sets right there. So the fact that Grand Canyon pulled that off against the number 1 team is very impressive. So I gotta give kudos to them on that. So Grand Canyon was led by Camden Gianni, who needs no introduction. He had 19 kills, only 2 hitting errors and he had 30 swings for a hitting percentage of .567. He was the only player in double digits in terms of kills when it came to Grand Canyon, as the second kill leader was Christian Janke, who had 7 kills, 3 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of 200 off of 20 swings, but that's alright. The fact that Camden Gianni put up those numbers was really impressive. In terms of assists, Heath Hughes had 33 assists, while in terms of service aces, Grand Canyon had 7 while they missed 17 serves, which is quite common in men's volleyball. Not to sound sexist or anything, but it is pretty common. As a team, Grand Canyon had 13 blocks. They had 7 solo stuffs, and they had 12 block assists, which actually wind up being 13 blocks overall. They had 27 digs as a team, as they were led by Christian Janke in that department, who had 7 digs. And as a team, Grand Canyon hit a whopping 355. That is pretty darn impressive. Now for BYU. How did BYU lose this? So, they were led by Gabby Garcia Fernandez, who had 15 kills, 7 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of .229. And then David Gardini, I think it's Gardini, who had 12 kills, 7 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of .172. Kind of underwhelming, but at least they had variety. In terms of assists, Will Stanley had 34 assists. I'm surprised Zio Meyer didn't play. Maybe Will Stanley was injured early on, or maybe he was sick. I don't know, but Will Stanley was the setter. They didn't bother running 6-2 and whatnot. BYU only had 5 service aces, while they had 17 service errors. In terms of blocks, BYU as a team only had 3. You cannot win games with just a whopping 3 blocks. They had 2 solo stuffs and 2 block assists, which total out to being 3. They basically had 10 blocks less than Grand Canyon. That is not so great defense. In terms of digs, they had 23 digs, and they were led by David Gardini, who had 6 of them. As a team, BYU hit a whopping 165. Now, that is because of Grand Canyon's amazing blocking at the net, but I will also say this, it's very uncommon to see BYU hitting that low. So, BYU has a lot of work to do, because that's not really good. They've already got 1 loss to UCLA, and everyone gave them a pass because BYU was missing Will Stanley. But now they don't get a pass because they were at full strength, and they still lost to Grand Canyon. Not good, BYU, not good. And I'll be circling back to this a little bit later. So, the next men's volleyball upset we had was McKendree over Lewis. So, I didn't even know McKendree was a thing until I saw the rankings. I'm like, oh, okay, this McKendree. And then I saw their win over Lewis. I was like, holy crud. This team actually beat Lewis? And Lewis was tied for number 3 in the AVCA polls, or last week's AVCA poll. So, the first set, McKendree took the first set 25-21, and the second set, Lewis took the second set 25-19. Set 3, McKendree won that set 25-19, and then set 4, McKendree won that set 25-22, completing the upset. McKendree led all of set 1, and it was just a battle of it was a game of runs, as whichever team got ahead basically just went ahead and never looked back for the most part. Like, set 3 was probably the closest in terms of ties and lead changes. So, looking at the stats, McKendree had 3 players reach double digits in terms of kills, as they were led by Ethan Carroll, who had 15 kills, while Patrick Ross and Zach Schnitker had 12 kills apiece. In terms of assists, Ryan Serrano had 41 assists. McKendree registered 8 service aces as a team, but they missed 16, which isn't too terrible. In terms of blocks, McKendree had a grand total of 18 blocks. They had 1 solo stuff and 14 block assists. They had 42 digs. Now, this was the mind-blowing stat. McKendree had 42 digs. 12 of them went to Francisco Comas, and then 11 went to Zach Schnitker. So Schnitker got his double-double, so that's cool. And then 8 also went to Patrick Ross, as he neared a double-double in terms of kills and digs. As a team, McKendree hit 277, which isn't bad, actually. So, as for Lewis, they were led by Ryan Conan, unsurprisingly, who had 18 kills. He did have 7 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of 268. Tyler Mitchum also had 8 kills, as well as Kyler Bouget. In terms of assists, Kevin Calling had 38 assists. Lewis only had 3 service aces, and they missed 18 serves, so that was another thing right there. In terms of blocks, Lewis had a grand total of 9.5 blocks. They had 33 digs, which was nowhere near McKendree's 42 digs. They were led by Kevin Calling, who had 7 digs. Actually, no. Jason Gibbs had 8 digs, and then Calling had 7 digs. As a team, Lewis hit 265, which actually isn't bad. But I'm just going to say this about Lewis. I'm really sick and tired of this team actually being praised as contenders. What is so special about Lewis? I'm just going to say this right now. Okay, these are my thoughts and opinions, so don't get too mad. But Lewis is probably the worst top 5 team I've ever seen. They are the worst ranked team ever. They lose to teams that they're supposed to actually beat. Like, they lost to Ohio State. They had to go 5 with New Jersey Institute of Technology. They lost to McKendree. McKendree didn't even have a standout win. And you mean to tell me Lewis lost? What kind of top 5 team is that? This is the worst top 5 team ever. I don't want anyone, I mean anyone, to tell me that Lewis is a contender. Like, I can name a list of teams that could beat Lewis. And Larry says I'm cold. I am not joking. There is no way a team of Lewis's Excalibur, who has one of the premier players in Division 1 and 2, should be losing to teams like Ohio State and having to go 5 with NJIT and then losing to McKendree. I will give McKendree the benefit of the doubt. They are a very good team. They haven't lost a match. And believe it or not, they actually went way up in the standings. And I give them a lot of credit. A lot of credit. But Lewis, to me, is the most fraudulent ranked team ever. I could see even, like, the bottom 15, not the bottom 15, the bottom 10, like 11 through 15 beating Lewis. Like, what's so special about Lewis? I don't understand it. Lewis is like the Missouri of men's volleyball. I am not kidding. Oh, but it's only going to get better. There are more upsets that I'm about to unleash on, such as this next men's volleyball upset. UCLA at Concordia. Now, on paper, going into this match, Concordia had not won one game. They came close to knocking off Pepperdine, but they didn't. And then UCLA already has 2 losses, having lost to USC and having lost to BYU. So UCLA took the first set 25-21, and then they took the second set 25-20. And I actually saw a little bit of this match, and I'm like, okay, UCLA's got this. There's no way UCLA's going to lose this one. Oh boy, was I wrong. So the third set, Concordia actually woke up, and they really took it to UCLA. They didn't actually trail by that much. There was only one tie and 1 lead change, which is pretty cool. So Concordia took the third set 25-20, and then the fourth set, Not too much trouble for Concordia, as there were only 2 ties and 1 lead change, as Concordia took the 4th set 25-22, and then set 5, everything just unraveled for UCLA. Concordia had all the momentum at home. Yes, that was actually played in Irvine, so Concordia had all the momentum after they forced a 5th set, and Concordia did complete the comeback, winning set 5 by a score of 15-12. Concordia also got a red card, Concordia got a red card point because UCLA's coach was argued one call with one of the line judges, so yeah, that's how Concordia got its first victory of the season, beating UCLA. And I forget what UCLA was ranked last week. I think they were ranked like 7th. They were still top 10, but UCLA losing. And I thought that loss to USC was the one that took the cake for UCLA. Time for me to unleash after I read the stats. So, Concordia surprisingly had a very balanced attack. They were led by Raymond Barsimian, who had 11 kills. He had 9 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of 63. While Jesper Schutt had 10 kills, 1 hitting error for a hitting percentage of 600. Eric Boisvert had 8 kills, 2 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of 462. And then Jordan Hoppy, a player that I'm familiar with, had 7 kills, 2 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of 238. Hoppy actually registered 6 service aces. 6! That is impressive. As someone who has seen Jordan Hoppy play, he is a very dangerous server. I saw him back in his days at Orange Coast College, and now he's a D1 stud at Concordia. Anyway, enough fanboying. McLean Mott had 37 assists, while, like I said, Concordia had 10 service aces, and 6 of them went to Jordan Hoppy. In terms of blocks, Concordia had 8.5 blocks, while they only had 33 digs, and they were led by Hoppy, who had 10 digs. So basically, Jordan Hoppy did a lot for Concordia in this game. As a team, Concordia hit 312. Not bad for a team that was down 2-0 in the match, so pretty cool. As for UCLA, they were led by Cole Ketrzynski, who had 19 kills, but he had 8 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of 282. He was the only player in double digits, though, as it was basically his show, as Alex Knight and Merrick McHenry each had 8 kills, while Austin Matauatia actually had 9 kills. Sam Coburn had 42 assists, while UCLA only totaled 5 service aces. And for a team that actually serves the ball well, I'm very surprised that UCLA had only 5 service aces. They missed 27 serves, but I meant to say this. Concordia actually missed 27 serves, so yikes. In terms of blocks, UCLA had 10.5 blocks, while in terms of digs, Sam Coburn totaled 9 digs, as UCLA had 37 digs on the night. As a team, UCLA hit 276, but I'm also going to say this. I know UCLA is a decent team, but I'm very surprised they lost to Concordia. How do you lose to a winless team on the road after you're up 2-0? Like, other than the aces, there wasn't much wrong that UCLA did. What is UCLA doing? And I'm surprised Larry is not roasting UCLA in the chat room. I probably have jinxed that, but how do you lose to a team that hadn't even won a game? There was even a point where Concordia actually paused its team events because of, I think it was a COVID outbreak or COVID-19 protocols. Either way, I don't think Concordia had played a match in over 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. And you mean to tell me your team ranked in the top 10 failed to beat a team that was winless? Oh gosh, UCLA. Too late. Larry B is already roasting UCLA. I don't get it sometimes. So, the two are actually going to be playing each other this week, so I'll be keeping an eye on that. So, Larry B gives UCLA 2 thumbs down. So that's all the upsets on the men's volleyball side of things. Well, the noteworthy upsets. Now for the noteworthy women's volleyball upsets. So, does anyone here remember what I did 2 weeks ago? A couple weeks ago, I had gone in on Missouri because they lost twice to Tennessee. Well, Missouri is back at it again, losing to a team that's inferior to them. The number 25 Missouri Tigers lost to South Carolina. Now, South Carolina is actually a good team. They actually were receiving votes in the AVCA polls. But UCLA, or not UCLA, South Carolina was actually coming off of a lost series, and they actually had one of their series postponed. So, first set, South Carolina. Now, this was probably the tipping point of the match. The first tipping point of the match. South Carolina took the first set 30-28. There are 18 ties and 8 lead changes. That is freaking amazing. Set 2, Missouri bounced back and took the second set 25-20. But the third set was the true tipping point. This was the turning point of the match. South Carolina took that close third set 25-23, and that seems to be one of the Achilles heels for Missouri this season. They always find a way to lose close sets. There were 12 ties and 3 lead changes, and I thought that Missouri had learned its lesson from a couple weeks ago against Tennessee, but they didn't. And keep in mind, this Missouri team was coming off of a two-match win over Georgia, which isn't really that good, but I digress. The fourth set was just all South Carolina, as South Carolina took that fourth set with no real problems. They lost 25. They won the set 25-18 and the match, which meant that South Carolina pulled an upset, which is cool. But it's not cool for Missouri because they lost to another team that they probably should have beaten. Again, I don't understand what Missouri is all about. Like what? Missouri had been ranked throughout most of the season, and now they're losing to teams inferior than them. They've only, going back to the Tennessee match, they had only lost 2 matches, and that was to Kentucky, which they're obviously really good. But most of Missouri's wins were 5-setters against inferior teams. The only 5-set match win that I'll give them credit for was Arkansas, but Arkansas doesn't even have a standout win this year, so I digress on them. But Missouri is, I'm just going to say it again, Missouri is the most fraudulent team in the SEC. How are you going to lose to teams you are better than them? Your team has been ranked all season, and now you're losing to teams like it's nobody's business. I can't believe it. Okay, now let's go to the stats. So South Carolina was led by Kyla Manning, who had 19 kills, 3 hitting errors, and a hitting percentage of 356, while Riley Whitesides had 18 kills, 6 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of 316. That's when you know Missouri's defense was pretty bad. When you're allowing 2 players to hit over 300, that is when your team is not blocking the ball well or digging the ball well. And then in terms of assists, Mallory Dixon had 31 assists, while Courtney Weber had 17 assists, which is quite surprising. The Gamecocks totaled 6 service aces and 6 service errors, which isn't too bad. In terms of blocks, they had 11 team blocks as a whole, which is pretty good. And as a team, South Carolina hit 279, which is pretty good. So, as for Missouri, okay, now I saw these stats. I was quite surprised that Missouri lost with these stats. So, Missouri had 4 players in double digits in terms of kills. And they were led by Kylie DeBerg, who had 22 kills. She had only 4 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of 333. Anna Dixon had 16 kills. She had 8 hitting errors, but she hit 216. Hollingsworth Santon had 11 kills, while Claudia Dillon had 10 kills. Andrea Fuentes had 53 assists. She was busy. Missouri only totaled 2 service aces, and they missed 14 serves. You missed I'm starting to now see the reason why Missouri lost to South Carolina. And as a team, Missouri only totaled 8 blocks. And as a team, Missouri hit 271, which isn't bad. But I'm just going to say this. How did Missouri lose when they had 4 players totaling double-digit kills? Their best player had 22 of them, and she hit over 300. With those statistics, you should actually be winning. Missouri does not know what volleyball is. It's any wonder Missouri is trailing Arkansas. And keep in mind, Missouri actually beat Arkansas twice. What are you doing, Missouri? Oh my goodness. I don't understand Missouri. Please, Missouri, somebody help me. And Seth said it best on the Sports Brunch. He actually agreed with me that Missouri is one of the more fraudulent teams in the SEC. I don't understand. I don't understand Missouri anymore. I'll be talking about them in a little bit more. So that's that upset. So now let's go to the Pac-12. So this upset makes a little bit more sense. Washington took down Utah in the first match as they took the first set 25-21. They took the second set, and that second set actually had 11 ties and 10 lead changes as they took the second set 25-23. And then the third set, Washington just had all the momentum in the world. They took the third set 25-19, winning the match over Utah. Now, Washington is a very good team. They were number 9 going into that match, while Utah was number 7 going into that match in the AVCA polls. But there was no surprise because Washington had actually had to deal with struggles, and Utah to me had no. They weren't really challenged by teams that were standoutish. They had to go 5 with Arizona State and USC. And Larry, please forgive me for saying this, but both USC and ASU aren't really that great. So I can see why Utah struggled. So anyway, in the match against Washington, they were led by Maddie Ensley and Claire Hoffman, who each had 12 kills. Sam Dreschel had 9 kills. Hoffman actually had a hitting percentage of .323, and Ensley had a hitting percentage of .455. Now, here's the thing about Washington. Washington basically revolves around Sam Dreschel, but when other players from Washington are getting involved, Washington just looks like a much tougher team. They look like a much more improved team offensively, so that is very key right there. And I'm very surprised they actually got multiple players involved. So, in terms of assists, LMA Powell had 36 assists. Washington only totaled 4 service aces, 3 of which went to Hoffman. And then in terms of blocks, they had 6 team blocks as a whole. Just gotta get that out there. They had 49 digs compared to Utah's 36. They were led by Shannon Crenshaw, who had 11, while Hoffman had 9, Dreschel had 8, and Emma Cali had 8. As a team, Washington hit 333. So now as for Utah, they were led by Danny Drews, who had 13 kills, 5 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of 267, while Kenzie Korber had 10 kills, 3 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of 233. Sage Kahaina Torres had 32 assists, while Utah only totaled 2 service aces. They missed 10 serves, which was not good. Just like Washington, Utah totaled 6 blocks as a team. They had 36 digs, which was nowhere near Washington's 49. They were led by Vanessa Ramirez. I think she is a freshman libero who had 10 digs, while Madeline Robinson had 8 digs. As a team, Utah hit 222, so there was that upset. But you want to know what's better than one upset in the Pac-12? 2 upsets in the Pac-12. And that was courtesy of Washington in the second match, as Washington picked up where they left off in the second match by taking set 1, 25-21. The second set was nowhere near close as Washington took that set 25-17. Now, it looked like Washington was actually going to sweep them. They were actually up 21-19 late in set 3, But then, surprisingly enough, Utah came back and outscored Washington 6-2, winning set 3 25-20 or 25-23, keeping them alive in the match. But Washington was in no mood for a fifth set, so they just dominated set 4 and won 25-18. So, as for the statistics, Washington, now unlike Missouri, Washington had 4 players reach double digits in kills. They were led by Claire Hoffman, who had 16 kills. She only hit 196, but that's okay. Sam Dreschel had 13 kills. She hit 273. Maren Grote and Maddie Ensley each had 11 kills. Ensley actually hit 588, which is darn impressive. She only had 1 hitting error. Ella Mae Powell had 48 assists, while Washington only had 3 service aces. They missed 12 serves. Now, the blocks were really in favor of Washington, as they had 17 team blocks as a whole. They had 3 solo stuffs and 28 block assists, while in terms of digs, they had 47. Now, I'm about to go over Utah stats, and you're going to be quite astounded by what their stats looked like. As a team, Washington hit 267, which is pretty good. Now let's go to Washington stats. So Utah stats, as Utah was led by Danny Drews, who had 21 kills. She actually almost had half of the whole team's kills. Kenzie Korber had 9 kills, and Danny Drews actually hit only 197. Korber had a hitting percentage of 160, and that was that. Sage Kaina Torres had 39 assists, while in terms of serves, Utah had 5 service aces. They missed 11 serves, which is kind of surprising how they were able to lose that match despite having a better ace ratio. In terms of blocks, Utah had a grand total of 8 team blocks. And in terms of digs, so I talked about how Washington had 47 digs. Utah had 66. Danny Drews had 15 digs, as well as Sage Torres, while Vanessa Ramirez and Kenzie Korber each had 12 digs. I'm just wondering how Utah had 66 digs and they still lost. Like, what are you doing, Utah? And as a team, Utah hit only 150. That was what killed them. They only hit that. They had hit that minuscule of a hitting percentage, and that was that. So I don't know why you lost that, but I'm also going to say this: Utah was not battle tested, and it also didn't help that. But in Utah's defense, I'll also say this: Utah's match against Oregon being canceled did not help matters, as it looked like Utah was rusty, and the fact that they weren't battle tested. They did not face a ranked opponent prior to this match, so it's kind of you kind of have to wonder why Utah lost that match. So now Washington's all alone in first place in the Pac-12, and they have the tiebreaker over Utah. So it's going to be quite fascinating how the Pac-12 turns out, because now anyone can win that conference, because for those that don't remember, Utah was actually selected to win the Pac-12. But now Washington has thrown its name in the hat, and the Huskies are now on pace to win the Pac-12. And they're out in front, and they're headed for the checkered flag. And to me, I think Washington has responded well despite losing to Arizona State early in the season and then losing to UCLA in 5 sets. So there's that right there. So now for the last upset of all the upsets that happened last week. So now this upset was very amazing. This one came from the West Coast Conference, and this came from the best non-Power 5 series that happened last week. It was BYU at Pepperdine. So number 12 BYU at Pepperdine. So I was very surprised how this match turned. So the first set, Pepperdine took the first set 25-20. Okay, not too big of a deal because I know how talented Pepperdine is. But Pepperdine never trailed in that match. Or never trailed in set 1. Set 2 was pretty much the same thing. there was only one tie. There was a combined 2 ties in the first 2 sets and 0 lead changes. In other words, Pepperdine never trailed from the first 2 sets. They took the second set 25-16, which I'm just thinking, wow, Pepperdine really has that much firepower. And Pepperdine only has 2 seniors on their team. They have a bunch of underclassmen. They're even starting freshmen, which is quite mind-boggling. So that's cool. So now for set 3. So set 3, BYU actually decided to show up because they actually took a brief lead, as there were 2 lead changes and 3 ties, but Pepperdine took control of it and they actually won the third set 25-19, sweeping BYU. And believe it or not, that was Pepperdine's first victory over BYU since 2011, 2011 or 2012. Either way, it had been almost a decade since, pretty much near or exactly a decade since Pepperdine last beat BYU. So that was very impressive for Pepperdine to pull out that victory. And looking at the stats, Pepperdine was led by Shannon Scully, who had 18 kills, only 4 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of .389, while Rachel Aherns had 14 kills, 3 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of .333. Meg Brown also totaled 9 kills, only 2 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of .583. She has been very impressive in the West Coast Conference, and it would not surprise me in the slightest if she got West Coast Conference Freshman of the Year. She actually was named the Freshman of the Week last week, so that's cool right there. In terms of assists, Isabel Zalea, who I believe she's a sophomore, had 42 assists, while in terms of service aces, they only had 4 service aces. 2 went to Madison Shields, the libero, and 2 went to Isabel Zalea. In terms of blocks, they had 7 blocks as a team, and in terms of digs, they had 52 digs. 18 went to Madison Shields, while Zalea had 8 digs. Kaylee Hames had 8 digs, and Shannon Scully had 7 digs. As a team, Pepperdine hit a whopping .349, which was very impressive. So, as for BYU, what went wrong for the Cougars? The Cougars were led by Erin Livingston, who had 10 kills. She hit .333, but that was the only impressive player for them offensively, as their next kill leader had 8 kills. That was Taylon Ballard-Nixon, who only hit 100 on the night. Their next kill leader had 5 kills apiece. That came from 2 players. Surprisingly enough, BYU ran a 6-2 offense. I think that might have actually what did them in, because I don't know if it was the first time they ran a 6-2 offense, but if that was the first time, then I could see why BYU struggled, because you're having to learn a new offense, and that's not ideal when you're playing a red-hot Pepperdine team on the road. Anyway, Taylor, Tausinga, Hifu, and Whitney Bauer each had 14 and 13 assists respectively. BYU only had 3 service aces, 2 of which went to Leilani Dodson. BYU totaled 4 blocks as a team, and they only had 36 digs, as Abby Dayton had 10 of them. As a team, BYU only hit 178. You're not going to win games when you hit that bad of a hitting percentage. Those stats are not what BYU is all about. And let me tell you this, for those that tuned in last week, I knew BYU was going to lose one of these matches. I knew BYU was going to have their first test against Pepperdine, and they got that first match, they really got socked in the face, which is quite surprising. So, and this just goes to show you Pepperdine is for real, and this is probably one of the better teams and most underappreciated teams in the nation, and this is probably a team that could challenge San Diego for the West Coast Conference Championship. So you got to keep your eye on them. And to me, BYU's youth really showed, as they have only 2 seniors, 2 juniors, and I think they have 5 sophomores and 6 freshmen. So that BYU team is very young. And personally, I don't know if they can win the West Coast Conference. If they can't beat Pepperdine, they're going to really struggle against San Diego. Like, they kind of struggled the week before against LMU, and LMU is nowhere near as good as BYU or San Diego or Pepperdine. So it's really going to be tough to justify BYU. However, BYU did actually pull out a 5-set victory over Pepperdine the day after Pepperdine won against BYU. So that is what salvaged BYU's chances of winning the West Coast Conference. So BYU still has a chance to win the West Coast Conference, but they're pretty much going to need to run the table going forward. And they still have that matchup against San Diego, which that could prove very large if the Toreros still remain undefeated. Just as a side note, San Diego is undefeated. They are 10-0. They're still ranked, and they beat San Francisco twice last week. So this week, San Diego actually has to go on the road to face Pacific in Stockton, California, and then next week, San Diego returns to Southern California to play Loyola Marymount. After that Loyola Marymount game, San Diego's schedule is really going to step up. Like, the schedule is going to come flying at San Diego after this week. And actually, as a matter of fact, Pacific's actually pretty legit if they're taking Pepperdine to 5 sets. So there's that. And that's pretty much my little spiel of the West Coast Conference. So before I go into a break, I actually do want to talk about Pepperdine for a bit. Pepperdine really impressed me last week. Now, obviously they played really well against BYU. They got a 3-set sweep over the Cougars, and then they took BYU to 5 sets. The 5th set actually was the 5th set score was actually 15-13, which I think in that 5th set it was just back and forth action. I don't think either team led by more than 2 points. So Pepperdine really showed a lot of grit against BYU. Another match that Pepperdine faced was number 6 Baylor, and they faced them on Saturday. They faced them just 2 days ago. So basically they got to practice, they got to hop on a plane to Waco, Texas, and they got to face the Baylor Bears in a non-conference game. So surprisingly enough, and to my surprise, Pepperdine actually took Baylor to 5 sets, but they lost. But I will say this, Baylor's just such a good team. Like, there's a reason why Baylor was number 6 in the nation going into that match, and there's a reason why Baylor is probably one of the more better teams. They have talented players like Yasonia Presley, Marquis Vandermark, Cara McGee. That's just a few of the names that they have on their team. Overall, this is a Baylor team that is still pretty good. They have taken a lickings when it comes to teams like Texas, but they only have one other loss other than the loss against Texas, and that was to Kansas, which was their Big 12 opener, which I think everyone can forgive Baylor for losing that match. But overall, Baylor is just still a very good team. And the one thing that separates Baylor from some of the pack is that Baylor has not lost at home. So Pepperdine was going to be lucky if they had to go 5 sets with Baylor in Waco. Now, if this were at Pepperdine, I don't want to say this, but I think Pepperdine might have been able to squeak out a 5-set victor over the Bears. But the fact that Pepperdine had an amazing week last week, having taken BYU to 5 sets, having beaten BYU, and having taken number 6 Baylor to 5 sets is very impressive. And it wouldn't surprise me if Pepperdine actually made the NCAA tournament. Now, there's still plenty of season to go, and they still have other teams to face. Like, they still have to face LMU in the PCH matchup. They still have to face some of the other teams in the West Coast Conference. They still have to face San Diego in their season finale, which that's going to be at San Diego, and that's going to be one tricky matchup. And then they also have to face Santa Clara, which could be a trap game. But Santa Clara's situation has been quite sticky, considering they've had COVID outbreaks, and then they've had to go by COVID protocols. So personally, I think this is going to be one tricky situation for Pepperdine. And Pepperdine kind of has, I mean, that going 5 sets really helps Pepperdine on its resume, but they can't afford any bad losses. They can't lose to teams like Gonzaga or Portland or any team that's inferior to them. I don't think Santa Clara is considered inferior, but they are still a talented team, considering they were chosen to finish third in the West Coast Conference. And the thing about the West Coast Conference is it's not a Power 5 conference, so that conference may struggle to get 2, if not 3, teams in the NCAA tournament. It all depends on which teams perform well, and it all depends on strength of schedule, and it all depends on standout wins. And it's kind of not fair for the West Coast Conference because of Power 5 bias, and also it also could be the case of West Coast bias because all these West Coast games, like in California and maybe in Utah and whatnot, play at 7 p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. Mountain time and whatnot. So some of the committee doesn't really see those upsets that happen. So it kind of isn't fair for some of those teams, but it also makes me wonder if the Power 5 conferences have a leg up on the non-Power 5. I don't know if that's the case for the non-Power 5 conferences, but I think Pepperdine is better than some of these teams that are currently ranked. Some of these teams that are ranked, I think Pepperdine can beat. Let's go over the top 25 AVCA coaches poll, starting with the women's, because ladies first. So number 25 is surprisingly Pepperdine. Pepperdine finally cracked the top 25 and is in the top 25, so good for them. Number 24 is Marquette. Number 23 is Creighton. Number 22 is Pittsburgh, or Pitt. Number 21 is Western Kentucky, so that's 25 through 21. 20 through 16, 20 is Oregon, 19 is Ohio State, 18 is Georgia Tech, 17 is San Diego, and 16 is Washington State. 15 through 11, 15 is BYU, 14 is Notre Dame, 13 is Louisville, 12 is UCLA, and 11 is Purdue. 10 through 6, number 10 is Penn State, number 9 is Utah, number 8 is Florida, number 7 is Washington, and number 6 is Baylor. 5 through 1, number 5 is Minnesota, number 4 is Nebraska, number 3 is Kentucky, number 2 is Texas, and your number 1 team still in the AVCA Women's Volleyball Coaches Polls is Wisconsin. Now let's go to the men's coaches poll. So the men's is totally different. 5 through 11, or 15 through 11. 15 is Ohio State. Welcome back, Ohio State. Number 14 is George Mason. Number 13 is UC San Diego. Number 12 is NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. And number 11 is UC Irvine. 10 through 6, number 10 is Penn State, just like the women. Number 9 is UCLA. Number 8 is Long Beach State. Number 7, surprisingly, and this is the biggest jump of the week, is McKendree. And number 6 is Grand Canyon. 5 through 1. Number 5 is Lewis. Surprisingly, they're still top 5. Number 4 is UC Santa Barbara. Number 3 is Pepperdine, so the men are still doing good things when it comes to men's volleyball. Number 2 is BYU. And keep in mind, BYU was ranked number 1 last week. So we have a new number 1 in terms of men's volleyball. Who is this new number 1 team? Drum roll, please. The new number 1 team in the AVCA Men's Volleyball Coaches Polls is Hawaii. Okay, it's not that significant, but that is cool. So Hawaii is now the new number 1 team in the AVCA Men's Volleyball Coaches Polls. Good for them. So, good stuff right there. And Larry B says, I don't like Lewis. I don't see any significance. What? I don't get why they're top 5. It's every year they're top 5, but they don't prove themselves as a top 5 team. So, there's that. Before we head to break, I actually do need to make note of some matchups that got postponed last week in terms of NCAA Women's Volleyball series. Last week, number 4 Nebraska at number 1 Wisconsin was postponed. Now, it wasn't postponed due to a COVID outbreak from either program. It was because Michigan State had a COVID outbreak within their program, and then Wisconsin decided to say, you know what, we're not going to risk it, and we're just going to quarantine, and we'll postpone the series against Nebraska. And here's what I don't like about the series. So I'm totally understanding of whatchamacallit, Wisconsin postponing that series, and then both coaches agreed. But what I didn't like were the fans. I have not seen anything so stupid than seeing some Nebraska fans saying, "Oh, didn't their football team pull this?" It's like, please don't say that. We're still in a pandemic. Wisconsin is just being safe. Would you rather your team have a COVID outbreak? Like, I swear, I don't mean to say this in a negative way for Nebraska fans, but Nebraska fans need to just stop asking questions. Like, please just not, like, say dumb things. Like, every time their team wins, they're always flexing all over Twitter, just talking smack to the other team, and just saying, trying to be funny, hence the words trying, but they're not funny. They're being jerks. And some people were saying, "Oh, well, Wisconsin are a bunch of cowards," or they were just stirring the pot. It's like, come on now, they're just trying to be safe. It's like, it's not, Wisconsin wasn't the one that asked for Michigan State to have a COVID outbreak. So they're just following COVID protocols, and they're just making sure that the virus doesn't spread. So please, Nebraska fans, please respect the decision between Wisconsin and Nebraska. I wanted to see that matchup go on, but unfortunately it didn't happen. But that's okay, because they said it's going to be postponed. It's not going to be canceled. So please, Nebraska fans, the world is not ending. Unless you want volleyball to be shut down, I would recommend zipping your lips and storing your words. Other series that were postponed or canceled: number 14, Notre Dame at number 13, Louisville. There were COVID protocols regarding Notre Dame, so unfortunately that had to be postponed. Arizona State at USC got canceled. Stanford at Oregon State got canceled because Stanford did not meet the requirements of the minimum amount of players, because Stanford is surprisingly dealing with a lot of injuries and whatnot, and COVID as well. So this has been tough times for Stanford. I think of all teams that have been hit hard by this virus, and in terms of graduation, Stanford has been the big team that's been hit hard. And then also Penn State and Maryland got canceled, as well as Michigan and Illinois. I actually was looking forward to Penn State, Maryland, because Maryland is the best blocking team in the Big Ten, and Penn State was still trying to get their bearings despite having beaten Indiana. So there's that, and there were a bunch of other postponements and cancellations, but those were kind of the noteworthy postponements and cancellations. So I know Pac-12 doesn't have too many noteworthy postponements and cancellations, but I kind of need to get that out there right now, just because of purposes. But on that note, we're actually going to take ourselves a quick little break. When we come back, I'll be getting into the previews for this week's NCAA women's volleyball matches. So you're listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hey guys, it's Blake Henley, better known as H-Town Blake to some of you. Happy to announce that Bases Loaded is back in full force. We'll be bringing that high heat every Tuesday night here on IE Sports Radio. So come home, get ready, dig into that batter's box, and see if you can chase that high heat, baby. So we'll be coming to you live with all the stats, all the rundowns, all the division rivalries, and every team that's going to make the playoff push to get to that one and only October and get to the pinnacle of what baseball is, to hoist that Commissioner's Trophy when it's all said and done.
What's good, fight fans? It's your boy, Marcus Los Great. Here to give you what you want. Here to give you what you need. Yeah, man. Yeah. I'm coming to you live, straight from your mama's basement with a crispy white tea. They're coming to you live every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Powered by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
And we are back with Set Point. You can catch all of those amazing shows on IE Sports Radio, and definitely do tune in to all of our amazing shows. Also, as a side note, we are 1 hour away from Bases Loaded going on with Brandon Buckingham and Blake Henley and Chris Garcia, aka Sports Brain. So definitely do tune in for that, and I definitely highly recommend tuning into Bases Loaded because Brandon, Blake, and Chris do a great job with their shows. So, or with their show. So there's that right there. And then also tomorrow, my brother Marcus Los Great will be going live with Gloves Off. So definitely do so if you haven't already, and it's going to be a fun time. And I highly recommend tuning into Gloves Off. My boy Marcus is here to give you what you want. He's here to give you what you need. And he's going to do it in a crispy IE Sports Radio black t-shirt. Because that's how he is. And that's my boy right there. So, now let's get into the women's volleyball preview matchups. I will also make this as a side note. I'll get into a little bit more beach volleyball next week. I didn't really pay too much attention because, in case you're wondering, there's a lot going on in terms of volleyball. There's NCAA women's volleyball, NCAA men's volleyball, NCAA beach volleyball, and Athletes Unlimited Pro Volleyball. That's a lot of volleyball I'm going to have to cover. And I don't like going over 2 hours. And I'm probably going to keep this session short just because I have stuff to do. But that's alright. So, we'll see. We'll talk more about AU Pro Volleyball next week. I do want to give a shout to past Set Point guests Emily Eamon and Peyton Cheng, who have done an amazing job bringing you coverage of AU Pro Volleyball this past week. Emily has been basically sideline reporting, while Peyton has been working the AU Pro Sports account. I gotta give them a round of applause. Alright, so now that that's out of the way, it's time for segment 2. We're going to preview all the NCAA women's volleyball matchups. And I promise you all, once Big West Conference season gets underway, and once everyone starts dipping their toe in terms of men's volleyball, then I'll get more in depth when it comes to NCAA men's volleyball. It's just so tough to talk like that along with three other volleyball events going on. So the first noteworthy NCAA women's volleyball series going on is from the SEC. It comes from Arkansas versus Florida. So this is going to be a 2-game series between the Razorbacks and the Gators. So here's the thing about Arkansas. So Arkansas has had a pretty impressive season. They've actually totaled 11 wins in the SEC, which is the most since 2012, which is quite astounding from what I heard. Either way, Arkansas is having a great season. They're actually beating teams that they're supposed to beat, unlike a certain other team in the SEC. And surprisingly, Arkansas is in third place in the SEC, which I never would have imagined. So that's some good stuff right there in terms of the SEC and whatnot. So yeah, looking at the standings, Arkansas is in third place behind Florida, which trails Kentucky in the SEC standings. But I will also make note of this. Missouri is also 11-5 in conference play, but something I also wonder is that why is Missouri behind Arkansas? Like, didn't Arkansas lose both matches to Missouri? Either way, I'm not going to complain. So, sorry, y'all. So, Arkansas is led by Jillian Gillen, who has 241 kills, and she has a hitting percentage of 191. Not too great, but not too bad. Also leading Arkansas in kills is Taylor Head, who has 179 kills, while Devin Wheeler has 103 kills. And then also making note worth is Elizabeth Pamphile, who has 77 kills. In terms of assists, Gracie Ryan has 640 assists. In terms of aces, they are led by Jillian Gillen, who has 29 service aces. In terms of digs, now digs are quite all over the place, as Lauren Evans has 209 digs, while Taylor Head has 199 digs, and Jillian Gillen has 162 digs, and Gracie Ryan has 155 digs. In terms of blocks, they are led by Elizabeth Pamphile, who has 42 blocks overall. As a team, Arkansas hits only 216, while their opponents are hitting 204, which isn't really that good. Here's the problem with Arkansas. Arkansas has no standout wins against ranked teams. They did go 5 with Missouri, but that's about it. That's about as close of a victory as they're going to get. As Arkansas also lost to LSU before their bye from last week. And then also they lost to Kentucky twice. They did challenge Kentucky a couple times, but that was about it. So Arkansas's having a good year, but they don't have any standout wins that'll make them scream NCAA tournament team. But a win over Florida would be great. So as for the Gators, which will be the home team and which has only lost one home game this year, Florida is led by Thayer Hall, they're led by Tara Caesar, who has 197 kills. Thayer Hall has 164 kills, while Holly Carlton has 103 kills. In terms of assists, they are led by Marley Monstrez, who has 153 assists, while in terms of aces, they are led by Tara Caesar, who has 17 service aces. In terms of digs, that is all over the place, as they are led by Ellie McKissock, who has 167 assists, while Caesar has 132. Paula Criame has 119 digs, while Marley Monserez has 111. So there's that. In terms of blocks, they are led by Lauren Dooley, who has 67 blocks on the season, while Holly Carlton has 47. As a team, Florida hits 176, while their opponents are hitting 153. So here's the thing about Florida. If Florida wants to have any shot of winning the SEC, they gotta run the table to the point where until they face Kentucky. Then they gotta beat Kentucky twice. Because Florida already has 2 losses already. They lost, and they both came from the fall. They lost to South Carolina, which surprisingly has been under the radar. And then they also lost to They lost to Georgia, which was very unacceptable. But Georgia always posts their annual upset win over a team that's a million times better than them. So there's that. But here's the thing about Florida. I expect Florida to win. If they don't win both matches, then they are all but doomed in the SEC. Like, they're the number 8 team for a reason. They got to win the rest of the way until they get to Kentucky. Then Kentucky they can focus on. So we'll see what happens with the Gators. The Gators have only lost 1 match at home, and that was against South Carolina. So, actually, no, they lost to Georgia. I'm sorry. They lost to Georgia, which I'm very surprised they lost to Georgia. Other than that, they still have a clean slate. They are 5-1, while Arkansas is 5-3 on the road. So, my prediction is Florida wins both matches. I'm sorry. I apologize to the Arkansas fans. I don't want you to say, "Oh, this guy's a hater," but I just don't see what's so special about Arkansas. They're having a good season, but I don't see how this team is an NCAA tournament team. Like, they don't have a true standout victory. They have some good challenges, but that's not going to really take them far. And no, we're not counting the Texas A&M wins, because Texas A&M eventually turned out to be frauds as well. They lost to Mississippi State, and we already know how I felt about Texas A&M all the way back in the fall. So that's the Arkansas and Florida series. Now let's go to the Big Ten, and this matchup is actually going to be this Wednesday, and this matchup is going to be between Ohio State and Penn State. So this is actually going to be the second matchup between these two teams. The first matchup, Ohio State won in 5 sets. Ohio State has been sweeping the Big Ten Conference Awards, as they're led by Emily Landot, who has 173 kills. Vanja Bukalic has 96 kills, while Gymnasia Moore has 84 kills. In terms of assists, Mac Podraza has 477 assists, while in terms of aces, Pedraza leads the team in aces with 14. In terms of digs, Kylie Murr has 185 digs, while Emily Landot has 84 digs. In terms of blocks, Emily Landot surprisingly leads that category. Or no, she doesn't lead that category. She's second in that category with 45, while Lauren Witt has 56 blocks and leads the team in blocks. As a team, Ohio State is hitting 259 while their opponents are hitting 170. Now let's go to Penn State. So Penn State's series last week against Maryland got postponed because of a COVID outbreak within Maryland's program. So it wasn't in Penn State's program like it was back a few weeks ago. I think it was back in week 2 of the Big Ten season. So Penn State is 4-3 ever since they lost to Ohio State in heartbreaking fashion. They did beat Indiana a couple weeks ago. Penn State is led by Johnny Parker, who has 106 kills, while Annie Kate Fitzpatrick has 69 kills. Anastasia Kudryashova has 68 kills, while Caitlin Horde has 66. I'm surprised this team doesn't really utilize Hannah Flowers all that much. She's only played 2 sets, which is very surprising. Anyway, Gabby Blossom has 219 assists, while Emily Arthur has 84 assists. In terms of aces, they haven't really served a whole lot. They've only played 7 matches, so I'll pass on that one. In terms of digs, they are led by Jenna Hampton, who has 80 digs, while Johnny Parker has 69 digs. In terms of blocks, they are led by Caitlin Hort, who has 43 of them blocks. And then also, Joni Parker has 25 blocks, and Serena Gray has 24 blocks. As a team, Penn State is hitting 256, while their opponents are hitting 177. So, here's my thing about Ohio State. So, Ohio State's having such a great year, and I'm very impressed with how the Buckeyes are doing. Here's my thing. Ohio State actually had to go 5 sets with Rutgers. Now, I don't mean to bash Rutgers, or I don't mean to be a hater toward Rutgers, but Rutgers isn't really the best team in the world, and a lot of Ohio State's matches have had to go 5 sets. They've all won their 5-set matches, as Ohio State is 11-0, and they are the best team in the Big Ten Conference as of right now. But they had to go 5 sets with Maryland twice. They had to go 5 sets with Michigan. They had to go 5 sets with Penn State, which they were down to nothing. And then they also had to go 5 sets with Illinois. And, like I said recently, they had to go 5 sets with Rutgers. So, over half of their matches, Ohio State has gone the distance. Now, some of those teams aren't really the best teams to go 5 sets. Illinois is okay. But Rutgers, Michigan, and maybe Maryland is... I don't know what you're doing. Personally, I don't know what you're doing, Ohio State. And honestly, this is where the schedule for Ohio State really picks up. Ohio State has another 2-game series after this, and that's going to be really tough for them going forward, as that's going to be very challenging in my opinion. And honestly, this is where their schedule starts to get very, very, very tough. Like, after this series against Penn State, Ohio State plays Minnesota in Ohio State. Like, this matchup is actually going to take place at State College. So they've got a 3-game slate this week. And they have to play 3 games in 4 days. That is going to be overtaxing. And against Penn State, I think Penn State's going to come out with a lot of firepower. And I think the Nittany Lions hand Ohio State their first loss. I know all the Ohio State fans are going to call me a hater and say, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Oh, our team's way better than this. I get it. Ohio State has a good team, and I think they can make the NCAA tournament. But here's the thing about Penn State. Russ Rose does not lose to a team twice unless it's Wisconsin or Nebraska or Minnesota or you name it. So if Ohio State's going to have to break out all the stops if they want to beat Penn State. And then, as I said, Ohio State plays Minnesota. Now this would be a good time to preview Minnesota's stats. So look at Minnesota's players. They're led by Stephanie Samity, who has 172 kills. She's hitting .263, which isn't bad. Taylor Landfair has 117 kills. She's hitting .237, and then Donna Rollins has 91 kills, and she was a difference maker as she was not present for Minnesota's loss to Nebraska. So there's that. Mulaney Schaffmaster has 368 assists, while in terms of aces, they're led by Cece McGraw and Reagan Pittman, who each have 12 assists, or 12 service aces, while in terms of digs, they're led by Cece McGraw, who has 135 digs. Milani Schaffmaster has 113 digs. Adana Rollins has 111 digs, and Stephanie Samity has 110 digs. In terms of blocks, they are led by Reagan Pittman, who has 46. Like I said a couple weeks ago, Reagan Pittman is the prime example of she doesn't have to post big numbers in the kill department to help her team get wins. So Reagan Pittman does everything else great defensively, and she also serves the ball pretty well. So Reagan Pittman is more so of a defensive player than an offensive player, and if she gets it going defensively, she's tough to stop at the net. So Minnesota is going to be a tricky challenge for any team. And as a team, Minnesota is hitting .240, but as they're holding opponents to .194. Now, here's the thing about Minnesota. Minnesota has been very, very battle-tested. They had to play Purdue, they had to play Penn State, and then they had to play Nebraska. Opponents that are ranked 11th, 10th, and 4th in the AVCA polls. Overall, I just don't see how Ohio State beats Minnesota, because Minnesota is just such a good team. Like, defensively, I feel they're gonna lock up Ohio State. Like, I want to see Ohio State prove me wrong, but I just don't see it. I don't see how Ohio State is gonna pull out a victory against Minnesota or Penn State. If anything, they'll push Minnesota and Penn State probably to like 4 or 5 sets. But I don't see the Buckeyes taking one match this week. I know it sounds harsh, but personally, I think Minnesota and Penn State are just going to prove too much. And Penn State knows how important this second match is. So Penn State can't afford to lose against Ohio State a second time, because that would knock them out of the top 10. And then Minnesota knows that if they want to win the Big Ten when they get to Wisconsin, they cannot afford to lose along the way to any other Big Ten opponents, such as Ohio State. But Minnesota's gotten its tougher matches out of the way. They got Purdue out of the way. They also got Penn State out of the way. So all that's really left on Minnesota's schedule is pretty much Wisconsin, if I'm not mistaken. Looking at Minnesota's schedule right here. Well, and also something to note for Minnesota is that last week's series against Michigan got postponed because of a COVID outbreak in the Michigan program. So the remainder of Minnesota's schedule looks pretty promising, as Illinois, other than Wisconsin, is pretty much their biggest threat to them in the Big Ten. So Minnesota knows that they need to win both games against Ohio State this week. Otherwise, that could pretty much put a damper on their Big Ten hopes. And then Ohio State has quite the daunting schedule going forward, because after this week, next week they play at Nebraska. Nebraska is a very tough place to win at. And then the following week, Ohio State plays Michigan, which I think they can beat them. But it all depends on which Michigan team we get. And then the following week after Michigan, Ohio State plays Purdue, and that's going to be quite the tough and difficult matchup because Purdue is number 11, and they know that if they want to make the NCAA tournament, they're going to need some standout wins. They've played teams tough like Minnesota, but it hasn't really shown in terms of the W and win and loss column, the win or loss column. And then Ohio State closes out the season against Indiana. But I will say this about Ohio State. They are having such a phenomenal year. It would not shock me to see the Buckeyes in the NCAA tournament. And it really is... It's really going great for Ohio State. And that win over Penn State really is standoutish. And I forget what stat I saw, and unfortunately I don't really know what stat it is. Ohio State is 11-0, which is their best Big Ten start since 1991, and this is the most consecutive wins since 2013, and it's actually the best start under a first-year head coach. So Ohio State women's volleyball does get a lot of credit for starting out strong, and including that big upset victory over Penn State, but this is pretty much the point of no return for Ohio State. They're going to really get a rude awakening when it comes to the Big Ten. So I got Ohio State going 0-3 this week. I don't like saying things like that, and Andrew Hagenbaugh has the right to dunk on me when it comes to his show, The State of Ohio Sports, which airs every Friday at 3 p.m. Pacific Time, 6 p.m. Eastern Time on iSports Radio. But If I am wrong, I will come out and say it. I will say I was incorrect about Ohio State. I think they're for real, and then I'll just apologize and say, well, there goes my little hot take. So there's that right there. All right, so now we go to the Big Ten Conference, or not Big Ten Conference, the Big 12 Conference, and this is actually going to be a non-conference game, and our next series to look at is Baylor at Texas. Number 6 Baylor at Texas. So Baylor had themselves quite the interesting week. Last week they beat North Texas. They swept them, and then they outlasted Pepperdine. Here's the thing about the match against Pepperdine. I think that match was kind of a trap game for Baylor. And I think Baylor knew it as well because Pepperdine is such a good team, and they really proved themselves. And I kind of think Baylor was looking a little too far ahead to Texas. Because Baylor-Texas is always a fun series, no matter what sport it is. So Baylor, I think, maybe looked a little bit ahead to Texas, which Texas is number 2 in the AVCA polls. So I already talked about Baylor last week. Texas is led by Logan Eggleston, who has 262 kills, while Breon Butler, Asia O'Neal, Skylar Fields is second on the team in kills with 168 kills. Asia O'Neal has 125 kills. Breon Butler has 119 kills. And Molly Phillips has 99 kills, which is cool. In terms of assists, Jenna Gabriel has 629 assists, while in terms of aces, Logan Eggleston has 24 service aces. In terms of digs, Texas is led by Morgan O'Brien, who has 157 digs, while Nalani Iosia has 138 digs. She's done well as a freshman. I'm just going to say that right there. Logan Eggleston has 126 digs, while Jenna Gabriel has 123 digs. In terms of blocks, they are led by Breon Butler, who has 77, while O'Neal has 66. And she is the daughter of Jermaine O'Neal, the former NBA star, so there's that. As a team, Texas is hitting .335, while their opponents are hitting .159. Now, Baylor, I pretty much talked about last week. Not much has changed with them. They are But Baylor is holding their opponents to 150 hitting percentage while they're hitting 276. And I'm just going to say this short and sweet. Texas is going to win. Why? Because last time Baylor played at Texas, it ended pretty bad for them. But I don't think Baylor is to be underestimated. A win for Baylor would be huge, but this is a non-conference match. And Texas still has 2 wins over Baylor this year, which was in conference play. So I'm going to say Texas takes this one in a thriller. I think this match goes 5 again. But as I stated before, Texas is going to win because Texas has not lost a game at Texas this season. They haven't lost a game at all. And when you play Texas at Texas, you got to be tough. But to me, I think Texas is going to... I think Baylor is tough with Yasonia Presley, but honestly, I don't think she could do it by herself. So I got Texas winning in 5 sets next week, but it's going to be close. So now let's go to our final match to preview. This one is going to be Pitt at... I think it's Georgia Tech at Pitt. Yeah, Georgia Tech at Pitt. This one's actually going to be next Monday. The Baylor at Texas matchup is going to be this Wednesday. So next Monday, by the time Georgia Tech at Pitt goes on, that match will already be done, and I'll probably be recapping it. So it's good. This is a good way to get the preview out of the way. So Georgia Tech has not played this spring. It's been quite a while since Georgia Tech has had a true challenge. They've won 7 in a row, but that was all the way back in the fall. So Georgia Tech is led by, in the kill department, Mariana Brambilla, who has 127 kills, while Julia Bergman has 116 kills. Michaela Dowd has 76 kills, and in terms of assists, Maddie McKissock has 269 kills. I wonder if she's related to the other McKissock on Florida. I'd have to double check that. In terms of aces, they are led by Bergman, who has 13 service aces. In terms of digs, they are led by Mariana Brambilla, who has 85 digs. Bergman has 84, Maddie Tippett has 82, and Michaela Dowd has 65. Trying to find this team's hitting percentage. It doesn't look like it's on here. Yeah. Unfortunately, here it is. Georgia Tech's hitting percentage is 326, while their opponent's hitting percentage is 192. As for Pitt, now Pitt's stats were kind of all over the place. They kind of got rid of their fall stats, which really makes me mad. So I'm just going to go over their stat leaders. So in terms of kills, Pitt is led by Kayla Lund, who has 149 kills, while Chinaza D is second on the team in kills with 116. Chiamaka Wakolo has 58, and Sabrina Starks has 53 kills. In terms of assists, Lexus Akio has 231 assists, while Kylie Levers has 163 assists. In terms of service aces, Kayla Lund has 10, while Akio has 6, and Kylie Levers and D each have 4. In terms of blocks, Sabrina Starks leads the team in blocks with 42. D has 33 blocks, Nuakolo has 30, and Lund has 22. Kayla Lund leads the team in digs with 102, while Marija Popovich has 96 digs. Valeria Vasquez Gomez has 74 digs, and Lexus Akio has 72 digs. So here's the thing about Pitt. Pitt has a lot to prove in this ACC matchup. If Pitt wants to have any sort of hope of making the NCAA tournament and keeping pace with Georgia Tech and Notre Dame and Louisville, they're going to need to run the table, and then everyone else is going to need to beat one another, and they're going to need a little bit of help along the way. Because Pitt is still good, but they're kind of deteriorating, and this could be troublesome, because ever since they lost that series with Syracuse, they haven't really been the same team. And then they also have some key losses to Notre Dame and Louisville, so there's that right there. Pitt has played a matchup this spring as they beat Villanova in 3 sets. Georgia Tech, on the other hand, is... Now, here's the thing about Georgia Tech. So Georgia Tech is 7-1. Their only loss came against Miami, and that was in the season opener. But ever since then, they've won 7 in a row, one of which was against Miami. And they've only lost 3 sets in their 7 matchups. So that's good. But Georgia Tech has not played anybody. I don't know why. I don't know why they didn't play anyone. I don't really know why. Don't hurt me, but Georgia Tech may be a little rusty. So this could be Pitt's chance. But here's the thing about Tech. They gotta prove themselves. They have not one standout win. Miami was pretty much their standout victory, but now that we have more teams, I don't see how Georgia Tech is pretty noteworthy. So if Georgia Tech does lose, I could see them dropping further in the AVCA polls, obviously, but maybe they could drop out. Maybe Pitt and Georgia Tech will swap spots. But either way, I'm going to say Pitt wins this one. I think Pitt is going to come out fired up and ready to go because they know they need a lot of wins going forward because they can't leave anything to chance when it comes to the AVCA experts and all of the selection committee of the NCAA tournament. Because remember, the NCAA tournament is basically 48 teams instead of 64 teams, and then there's only 18 at-large spots as the Big West Conference and the Ivy League weren't going to have a league this year, and therefore there are now 2 more extra spots in terms of at-large spots. So there's that right there. So I think Pitt is going to knock off Georgia Tech. I think it's going to be the case of Georgia Tech being too rusty, Georgia Tech not being battle-tested, Pitt coming with a sense of urgency, Kayla Lund having her dominant performance, and then D and Nwokolo Wokolo. I think her name is pronounced Wokolo, because I actually was listening to the pronunciations, and then I was pretty much off on some of them the first time. But Chiamaka and Chinaza are going to have big games as well. Kayla Lund isn't going to just carry the team. She's going to get some assistance, and then I think Pitt is going to prove themselves. This is going to be Pitt's breakout win. I know they have a breakout win against Louisville and Notre Dame, but those 2 already beat them. And here's the thing about Georgia Tech and Pitt. They're only going to face each other one time. There's not going to be a second time. Because unlike regional play, Georgia Tech and Pitt aren't in the same region, and they don't get to face one another, which is kind of a bummer, but it is what it is. So I think Pitt takes this one, because Pitt is also a very good team at home, and I think Pitt just has that more oomph in it. And Kayla Lund does not want to go down in defeat against a Georgia Tech team. I don't get me wrong, Georgia Tech has good players, and they are the reigning NIVC champions, but who has Georgia Tech beaten? Georgia Tech has not beaten anyone noteworthy. This is Pitt's chance to say, you know what, we're taking our spot back. You're going bye-bye. So I'm picking Pitt to win in 4. So, and if I'm wrong, then I'll sing my praises about Georgia Tech actually being for real. But I don't see Pitt losing, because Pitt has a talented team. It's just tough to justify them because they lost those first 2 matchups to Syracuse, which really hurt them. So there's that right there. So that is pretty much going to be that for my previews, and that is going to be that for tonight's episode of Set Point. Thank you all for tuning in. I know I had to cut it a little bit short, but I've got stuff going on in a little bit, and we need to prepare you all for the next show, which is Bases Loaded, which will be coming on in T-minus 25 minutes, and that's going to be on StreamYard. So the best place to look at the Bases Loaded, the most recent episode of Bases Loaded, is probably go to YouTube and go to iSports Radio's YouTube page and basically just look for the most recent upload of Bases Loaded, and it's going to be a fun time. I definitely recommend tuning into Bases Loaded. Brandon Buckingham, Blake Henley, and Chris Garcia are going to be going over and previewing the American League and National League. So definitely tune in, and definitely tune into all of our other shows, and definitely give iSports Radio a follow, as we are a bunch of sports fans and podcasters who wish to put on for the fans, and we are for the fans, by the fans, and we definitely appreciate your support. If you can, give us a follow on Twitter and on Instagram. We are at IE Sports Radio. And then if you go on Facebook, go to the search bar, look up IE Sports Radio, and if you see a black banner along with white letters, that's us. That says IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. That is for sure us. If you can on Facebook, definitely leave us a good little rating, because we definitely appreciate it, and it definitely helps us improve our craft. And definitely leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, because we feel we are worthy of it, and we want to prove ourselves to all of the fans and help us improve along the way. So that's going to do it for tonight's episode of Set Point. The first ever, well, not first ever episode on a Monday, but first ever episode on a Monday evening. Though I think I've had past Monday episodes on Monday evenings. Either way, it is that time, people. It is time to drop the beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you all very much for listening to Set Point. If you were listening on the playback, I definitely appreciate you. If you were listening live, I appreciate you. If you are listening to this at any time, any place, anywhere, I appreciate you. And if you were listening to all of IE Sports Radio's other shows, I appreciate it. For everyone here at IE Sports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. Have yourselves a great rest of the evening. Have yourselves a great rest of the week going forward. Enjoy some volleyball, and just enjoy life, and I shall catch you on Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Have a great night, everybody.